Hello everyone, in the Secrets to Sleep Baby and Toddler Sleep Help group. My name is Courtney. I'm a pediatric sleep consultant. I help families get a great night of sleep so they can enjoy the time they have with their little ones. Hello. Say hi if you're on the live. If you have questions, feel free to post, be interactive. Even if you're watching the replay, post your questions so that I can, write some answers after. Today we are talking about the 5 o'clock early wake up. So for some, this could be 4 o'clock in the morning, it could be 5 o'clock in the morning, but it is one of the top things that people ask about, their little ones. So the number one question I get is, why does my baby wake up constantly in the night? I did do a live about that recently. So if you want to know why your baby wakes up frequently in the night, look for that live. If you have a toddler, you have toddler sleep challenges, all these lives are recorded and then they're posted in the featured section of the group. So if you have a toddler and you're still struggling with bedtime and separation anxiety, look in the featured section of the group for that one. If you want to know when your baby can sleep through the night, I did a live and it's recorded and it's in the featured section. Check out that one, okay? So today is all about the 5 o'clock early morning wake up. So post below if that's your little one and how old they are, okay? I definitely find that it depends on the age of the baby or the age of the toddler for kind of what my recommendations are when it comes to this. But in general, I'm just going to go through kind of my list of the things that cause this and how we can make changes to it. So some things may apply to you and your family and others may not. And I'll just give you a hint on my opinion on the 5 o'clock wake up. If we're talking kind of toddler years, so different from baby, but if we're talking about a toddler, I definitely find that this is one of the most challenging ones to actually correct. So when I do my 3 Weeks to Better Sleep program, if someone came to me just with I have a toddler that wakes up early in the morning, I'd probably be a little bit hesitant to want to charge them for services, just because I'm yeah, I know that one sucks, doesn't it? That's the worst. I'm I have, 2 kids and I specialize in pediatric sleep. We have, really great sleep hygiene is what you call it. We have really great bedtime habits and all of that. And, my daughter was, 3 years old and still struggling with the early morning wake up as well. So it's not the easiest one. It's not just oh, just do this and this, which is kind of what I would recommend for other situations. This is there are quite a few different reasons why this happens, and it's not simple to change them. So let's go into some of the reasons, okay? Okay, so here's why it happens, okay? Here's what it's all about, that early morning wake up. Why do kids feel the need to start the day at 5 o'clock? Okay, so there's actually 2 things that go on in sleep that we'll talk about. One is our body temperature. Our body temperature is very directly aligned with our sleep and our sleep cycles, okay? So at nighttime, it's usually warmer. We tend to heat our homes, that sort of a thing. And then when it comes to that early morning, the temperature in the house drops. And when we are in that phase of our sleep, the temperature in our body drops, okay? So maybe if anyone's interested later, I can show you the body temperature and sleep cycle chart, because they're directly linked. It's really interesting to see. It kind of shows you okay, that's what's going on. So there's a really natural reason why we tend to wake up. Our body temperature drops. It's cold in the house, it wakes us up. Okay, so that's one reason why. My recommendation is to make sure that your little ones are really, really warm for that 5 o'clock in the morning wake up. So and it's a challenging one, because when it comes to babies, we don't want them to overheat either, because that interferes with sleep. So sometimes it's kind of if it's a toddler, sometimes I'll say, before you go to bed with your toddler, go in and put an extra layer on, something like that, because they probably don't need that extra layer when they go to sleep. But then at 5 o'clock in the morning, the extra layer can kind of prevent that wake up. So one is that body temperature. Another reason is the light that comes in at that time of the day, right? So naturally it starts to get brighter at that time. I definitely am a huge fan of blackout curtains, making sure the room is pitch dark. So blackout curtains to me means the room is pitch black. Okay, so I work sometimes in person with families. I went in person and I've looked at the homes and they're see, we have blackout curtains. And there's a huge gap between the blackout curtains and then there's this light streaming in. I'm those aren't blackout curtains. So I'm a huge fan of going on to Amazon, if that's an option in the country you live in. But over here, we're pretty cool with Amazon. Get some suction cup ones. You just stick them directly up and it keeps it nice and dark so that our children know that it's still it's still nighttime. It's not time to get up. So that's prevention again. And then another reason, so we've already mentioned that it's natural for them to wake up because of their body temperature drop at that time of the night. And then there's also another thing. So we call it sleep pressure. So if you've ever been in the car and your little one has like a 5-minute nap, they fall, asleep in the car on the way home. And then after you're like, oh no, you try and put them down for their nap and you can't get them to go to sleep. It's because they don't have enough sleep pressure anymore, right? Like they just had a little nap, Or you notice that like if you try and, you let your little one's nap go until like 4 or 5 p.m., and then you try and put them back down to sleep at 7 o'clock, if it's like a toddler, and they can't go to sleep anymore because they don't have enough sleep pressure, okay? So this is what sleep pressure is. It's how our body, when we go without sleep, how it starts to tell us that we need sleep, okay? Sleep pressure. So interestingly enough, at 5 o'clock in the morning, we don't have a lot of sleep pressure, right? So it means that like if you've done kind of most of your sleep, toddlers don't feel that sleep pressure, that physical, need to go back to sleep. So, as adults, if we wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, we probably have plenty of reasons why we would love to go back to sleep, and we just do it, and we don't really need the encouragement. But, with the little ones, it's a little different because they're so excited to start the day and they want to get up, whereas adults, we don't really want to get up usually at 5 o'clock. So they don't have a lot of sleep pressure at this time. They've had a full night of sleep just about. Usually it means, just so you know, again, like I didn't show the like sleep chart here because I'm not that awesome, but if anyone's really interested, I can show a sleep chart. At that kind of 5 o'clock in the morning wake up, our body temperature massively drops, causing this wake up, but also we've done our entire night of sleep apart from like one, full sleep cycle at the end here. So this is a challenge. It means that people who are letting their toddlers get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, it means that their children are missing one sleep cycle. They're not getting quite enough sleep. It's not something that I'm like necessarily like concerned for, the health of kids or anything, but I think it's important to note that they are missing a sleep cycle. They should be going back to sleep. So that's important about that. But like I said, it's not an easy one because there's not a lot of sleep pressure. So that goes into the next one is about habits. So like that's why this is such a challenging one, because habits are so important. I'm going to go in a minute into like schedule and that sort of a thing. If it's a baby, a 0 to 1 year old, it has to do with more like schedule and habits, okay? But if it's a toddler, habits are huge, okay? So let's see, what did I write for habits? Yeah, I went into it. So this is kind of a little bit both for baby and toddler, but we talked about sleep associations. So if you have a little one that like wakes up during the night, okay, so they wake up during the night because they want you to rock them back to sleep. Then at 5 o'clock in the morning, they're ready for the day. Okay, so this is very habit related. We've already mentioned why they're waking up. That's that issue of that, that body temperature drop, the brightness in the room possibly, the sleep pressure is really low at that point in the day, and then you can't get them back to sleep because they also woke up because they need to be rocked back to sleep. If you're a rocking to sleep family, you could be a breastfeeding to sleep family, it could be a little one with soother. There's different reasons why little ones wake up because of, sleep associations, specific habits to sleep. Okay, so that's definitely a huge culprit too. So if you have a 0 to 1 year old and your little one wakes up during the night and starts their day at 5 o'clock, like that can definitely be corrected with making changes to that sleep association, if that makes sense. If you have a toddler, so my daughter is 4 years old, she'll still get up early in the morning. We have habits in our home that help with that because it's normal for her to wake up. And then, so we got a grow clock. So that's one of the ones that it changes color. So funny enough, like it's relatively new because this is what it was. She would, wake up and it'd be whatever time in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. She'd come into my room and she'd be like, can I start my day? And I'd look at the clock and I'd be like, no, you have to do another sleep. And she goes, okay. And she goes back to her room and then she'd come back and it'd be 5 o'clock in the morning. And she'd be like, can I start my day? And I'd be like, no, you can't. And, it'd be 6 o'clock in the morning, and then 6 o'clock for me is kind of the cutoff of like, okay, yeah, that's fine. You're allowed to start your day at 6 o'clock. We got a grow clock now. My kids have pressed buttons on it, so it stopped working. I have to reprogram it, like yahoo for us. But it was working really great for the 2 days before they started pressing the buttons on it. And pretty much I've programmed it so that at 6 o'clock in the morning, the color changes from red. Red symbolizes sleep. My kids are experts in pediatric sleep. They know that red means nighttime, doesn't interfere with our melatonin production. And then green at 6 o'clock means go. So she's allowed to get out of her bed once it turns green. She's allowed to, come downstairs, grab some breakfast, whatever. she's allowed to start her day at that time. And we've programmed it. So that's kind of habits. So habits for toddlers are huge. So, for example, if every morning your little one wakes up at 5 o'clock in the morning, comes to you and wants to start their day, and you let them get out of their bedroom, come downstairs, watch TV, whatever, it's actually like a super hard one to break, So that's why sometimes it's a little bit like, man, that 5 o'clock in the morning wake up is very challenging. My recommendation is if you have a toddler that's waking up at 5 o'clock, to have some sort of system in place. So this would look something along the lines of, quiet time, right? Can't necessarily force your toddler to go back to sleep. For us, it's pretty easy because my little one's a little bit older. And so I'm able to just tell her like, yep, you have to go back to sleep. She goes back to her room. She goes back to sleep. We've obviously gotten into this habit. But let's say you have, a 3-year-old that they're pretty convinced that it's, time to get up and play. One option is something like a grow clock, oh, it's not time yet, or you verbally telling them it's not time yet. And then them having some time that they can still stay, in their room, or if they're, in your room and co-sleepy or whatever it is, in a safe space. It can be with you, it can be without, depending on where their comfort level is, where their separation anxiety is, and, quiet playtime, something like that, So it kind of encourages that, you can go back to sleep if you can, right? I'm going to keep sleeping because it's still nighttime, so changing those words, those mentalities, making sure that they know that it's nighttime until 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock I know is really early for us as grown-ups because we really like to sleep in, but that is when it starts to be kind of, I consider it like cutoff time of like, yeah, it's pretty normal for them to be like up and ready to do their day at 6 o'clock. So I'm not going to go into like crazy tons about it today. If you have a toddler that struggles with toddler sleep, post below toddler sleep group call, and I can get you hooked up with our free toddler sleep group calls. They're really fun. We can talk about some of these things. You can ask your questions, especially if you have a toddler that like wakes up in the night and you just like don't know why. Like you're like, I don't rock my toddler. It's not like we're a breastfeeding to sleep family that, I've got specific calls for those if that's for you. But there's reasons why toddlers are waking up in the night, and we can definitely chat about it on the toddler group calls. So the last point is schedule. So schedule is really important, especially because I love this one, okay? In my opinion, as someone who obviously specializes in sleep, most people put their kids to bed really late, I can't necessarily say really late, but it changes for everyone. But there's a tendency to put your kid to bed when they're like, just like, falling asleep, right? Parents don't want to, it's not want to. I know it's not want to. I know it's like parents aren't necessarily, knowing when is the best time to put their kids to bed. So they're waiting till their kids are very, very tired, putting them in their bed when they're like falling asleep. They're kind of crashing, right? So like that's kind of what that is. So let's say your toddler goes to bed at, let's say 9 o'clock, okay? Then your toddler still wakes up at 5 o'clock, okay? This is super common. One thing I definitely notice is that the number one thing that people are going to do when their little one wakes up at 5 o'clock is then push bedtime later, hoping that they will sleep in longer. It seems like that would make sense. As adults, that makes sense for us. Your little one is actually like missing sleep, and then like my recommendation would actually be to bring bedtime earlier. So bedtime should be kind of around 7:30. That sounds kind of crazy, I know, because there's so many different ages, and you'd be like, well, how would like, a 6-month-old baby and, a 2-year-old both go to bed at the same time? And the difference is naps, right? Like obviously a 6-month-old baby, my recommendation would be for 2 2-hour naps during the day, and then they're going to have bedtime around 7:30. Let's say, a 1.5-year-old, they've just moved to one nap in the middle of the day. They might be just barely making it to 7 because obviously, they're not having as much daytime sleep, okay? So, 7:30, something like that for bedtime. My recommendation is not to push bedtime later if your little one wakes up early. It's actually to move it earlier. That means that their wake up, instead of being at 4 or 5 o'clock, we've already talked about sleep pressure. When there's not a lot of sleep pressure, when it's brighter and when there's a lot of reasons why their body's telling them like, we don't really know, we need to go back to sleep. It's actually to move everything earlier. So their wake up instead at like 3 o'clock in the morning when it's still quite dark, like all of those things. And it's actually easier to get them back to sleep at that point in time. It is really challenging to get our toddlers back to sleep at 5 o'clock in the morning. So if that's at all helpful. So those are kind of the main notes I had on the early morning wake up. Let's see if there's any questions. 9 months of age, yeah. Definitely recommend making sure that little ones know how to self-settle, right? So if it's one of those things that if they're waking up and they want you to rock them back to sleep, something like that at 5 o'clock in the morning, it's kind of a losing battle, right? Because of all the reasons I mentioned. So definitely recommend self-settling methods. I definitely recommend, if you want to join a group call, those are things that I've got, just as a free resource for everyone. I offer rocking to sleep group calls, breastfeeding to sleep group calls, and toddler sleep group calls. If there's anything that you don't fit into the category and you want support, you can post that below too. Or if there's any type of group call that you think would be really helpful that I don't really fit into these categories, but I'd really love this category open, message me that as well. Yeah, so it's nice chatting with everyone. Thanks for all of your, posts and comments. And yeah, let's have a great rest of the week. Thanks everyone. Bye.